So we have some pretty substantial news to comment on. That's going to be the cancellation of a massive thing related to graphics cards. I'm not talking about just one GPU being canceled. It'd be one thing if I told you, oh, NVIDIA is going to cancel a 4080, but they're still releasing something else. This is going to be a little bit bigger than that, and it's going to show the current state of the GPU market, as well as what we can expect in the future. Recently, the YouTuber Moore's Law is Dead. I recommend you guys check him out. He has been reporting on the Intel Arc GPUs, and it seems like they are completely canceled, the discrete GPUs. I'm not talking about just one particular model. The entire project seems to be shelved. So this is very interesting news indeed. I even remember watching the news yesterday. The Intel CEO was breaking ground in Ohio yesterday for a new chip manufacturing plant that they're building. With the new, Congress passed various laws recently with the CHIP Act and things like that in order to spur more production. So very interesting. He also mentioned they're going to get out of several businesses, and I guess the graphics cards business is going to be one of the major ones that they're leaving. Now, they never really even started to release these, even though it kind of seemed like they did, maybe in certain countries, but we as gamers never saw them in the way that we see AMD and NVIDIA GPUs. So this is very interesting because it not only tells us what the current market is like now, but what can we expect in the future. Now, in the video, he did make a good point that Intel probably sees the problems that are going to be coming up. They haven't really been able to get a very competitive GPU to be very stable. They've had various, driver issues, GPUs on the range of at most an RTX 3070. And the problem with that is that NVIDIA is about to release the 4090 and the 4080 and the 4070. They're going to be an entirely new class of, GPU, much better performing, regardless of what the price or priced pretty good is a Windows CD key. Today's video sponsor is going to be VIP-CDKdeals.com. Very simple process. You can get a Windows 10 Pro CD key and remember to use code CC20 for a nice discount. Availability may be. Not only that, we have Ethereum going to proof of stake, and that's potentially going to cause a massive sell-off in the GPU market, meaning that you're going to see RTX 3070s for a significant discount. Right now, you can already find used GPUs for much cheaper. Look at all of the retail RTX 3090 GPUs going for well under $1,000, not to mention every GPU going down in price. Imagine how this is going to be like when the market does get more flooded with GPUs. You're going to see even 3070s and 3080s for much, much cheaper than their MSRP ever was, making a new entrant into the market like with Intel extremely difficult, if not impossible, something that would be protracted into the future. This isn't just something that's going to be resolved this month or this quarter or with the release of RTX 4000. This is an issue that could actually take years to pan out, and that's going to mean while Intel is focused on their new chip production for whatever else that they may be more profitable in, this is a business that's just going to burn up a lot of their resources, and it's certainly not going to be worth it. I guess that shows you how difficult it is to really get a competitive graphics card out in the market. So maybe what NVIDIA does, and even AMD, it's actually looking pretty impressive that a company like Intel, with all of their massive resources, can't seem to get it together and get a product out in sort of a cheap, reliable, stable way in time for any type of release. Now, this would have been a lot easier for them if the GPU market continued to stay on its highs like it was last year. It seemed like last year companies could release basically any GPU and they'd be able to sell them, even like the AMD 6500 XT, which was really terrible. Some of the really low-end NVIDIA GPUs that they were bringing back that were even not suitable for gaming. Back then, Intel certainly would have sold a lot of GPUs because, let's face it, anything was selling. But now the market is much, much tighter, much more difficult. People actually want a lot of performance for a much cheaper price, especially considering they can get retail fairly cheap now because NVIDIA has allowed a price decrease on all their GPUs. And not to mention that the secondhand market is starting to become absolutely flooded with cheap, good, used GPUs, leaving Intel in a very tough place. I mean, they were even showing off resolution scaling technology and various things with their GPUs, so I'm sure they did take it seriously for a while, but it seems like the technological hurdles were just way too much, and the market conditions are just not there for them to be able to make any dent in the GPU market. So going forward, that's certainly unfortunate because it's going to put us, the consumer and gamers, in definitely a worse spot because it's less competition. If you have one dominant company like Nvidia with maybe just AMD knocking at their door, even that's likely not enough to have a really healthy market, because then, just like they did last year, both companies raised prices, very, very high, and they both seem to almost be in sync a lot of times with, pricing and different strategies. So just two companies doesn't really make a very competitive market. You really do need maybe 3, 4 companies, maybe one as a big disruptor with a new innovative technology at lower prices in order to make it much, much more competitive. So it looks like we're going to be seeing this high-priced GPU dance for the next couple of years. And even worse, now that there's less competition and there's going to be a lot of RTX 3000 GPUs on the used market, it seems like AMD and Nvidia, they're not going to have to innovate nearly as much, because if people aren't buying and the cash flow really isn't there, they're going to sort of iterate the products that they have, much like Intel did with their processors for a very long time, having just very small evolutionary changes every year. And then, of course, AMD came and had revolutionary changes with more multi-threaded cores and things like that at cheaper prices. That made a huge difference, but that was what competition did. Right now, AMD and Nvidia are going to be the only game in town. If they don't want to compete and they're fine with just releasing mediocre upgrades every year for still the same prices, that's going to be worse for us, the consumer. But very interesting that Intel has canceled and pretty much gotten out of the complete GPU game. Now, we don't know if they're going to sort of stay in it a little bit for laptops, or maybe even eventually release something very, very limited. But it does seem, especially from the reporting from Moore's Law is Dead, that we're definitely not going to be seeing the discrete GPUs like we would see a 3070 or, an AMD 6800 out on the street. Definitely does not seem like it's happening. Of course, it's been delayed a lot. They've had various problems, and it looks like they have to make a pretty big business decision, which is unfortunate for gamers. But really, looking at the GPU market now, it looks like they're probably making a pretty good move, because it's going to be very tough, especially if the market gets flooded. And the competition is really fierce with Nvidia. They've been dominant in the market for a very long time. Look at the amount of trouble that AMD, which has really good GPUs out already, has had against Nvidia. They still haven't been able to overtake them. So this is going to be interesting to watch the next few months what happens at the top with both AMD and Nvidia. But at least for now, we can expect Intel to be out. It's a shame. We were really looking forward to it. More products, different type of consumer products that gamers could get their hands on that would perhaps perform really well, maybe not be priced as highly as some of these GPUs that we've come to expect during the last few years. But looks like that part of the story is out. So we're back to focusing on mainly Nvidia and with AMD. Let's see if AMD with RDNA 3 is going to bring enough competition to really make it a very healthy environment against Nvidia. If not, we're just going to have Nvidia dominant for the next few years, dictating whatever they want to happen in the market. As we've seen for the last few years, that's really not always a good thing. It's great because we love their products, and it's very exciting to get a new GeForce GPU, or even an AMD Radeon when it's the high-end GPU. I'm the first one to say it. I love graphics cards. That's why my channel is focused around that. But unfortunately, some of the business practices and some of the the side consequences of graphics cards aren't always the best, with prices going up really high, availability being bad, sometimes GPUs that are way too expensive for their performance on the market not really sort of pairing up. So there are definitely a lot of issues there. At the end of the day, we do love graphics cards. Nvidia and AMD both put out great products. Would have been nice to see Intel do the same, but unfortunately, we're stuck with just these two. So let's see what's going to happen. Remember to write down a comment below. I really want to know what you guys are going to think about Intel completely exiting. Now we're stuck with Nvidia and AMD. Do you think that's enough for competition? Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.